Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm your host, Dylan Fix, which I feel like I haven't said enough on this channel. So hey, how's it going? Welcome. Today's topic, Star Wars, The Last Jedi. Now, I feel like I have never seen a dog pile on a movie like this by the internet community since probably the prequels. And while I'm not necessarily the biggest prequel fan anymore now that I'm older, I think it's fair to say when it comes to the prequels, those movies were scanned top to bottom with a magnifying glass to actively look for reasons not to like the films. While in the case of The Last Jedi, it was more like the movie was scanned top to bottom, left to right, backwards and forwards with a microscope to look for any and every reason to hate this movie. And today I wanted to address some of those problems people have with this movie, but not necessarily any of the lesser questions people have, but probably the biggest questions everyone seems to have on their list of reasons why they don't like this movie. And hopefully after I've answered these questions, maybe you can sit down and find a new appreciation for these films, and maybe even enjoy them. Or maybe you'll find new reasons to hate them. Who knows, but with all that being said, let's get started. Question 1. When has fuel ever been a problem in Star Wars? Well, that's a fair question, though I think it has a relatively simple answer, because the First Order made it a problem. Think about it. Every other time beforehand, the Rebels and the Resistance, they've always been able to safely escape by jumping the light speed, because up until that point, no one's been able to track someone through light speed, at which point they can just safely refuel at their leisure. But now, the First Order's changed the game, and they've taken away that one advantage they always had. And this actually makes me really excited for the final installment for this trilogy, because no matter how the story goes, wherever the Resistance decides to draw the line in the sand and stand up to the First Order, they are doing so with the knowledge that they are there to either fight and win or die, because now there is no option to run. So I'm expecting a big final clash against the Resistance and the First Order, and that just gets me jacked up. I'm fucking ready. Next question. Question 2. Why doesn't the First Order fleet just destroy the Rebel ships? And while in the movie it does give the excuse that the Resistance ships are smaller and faster and they're able to keep out of range of the First Order's far more damaging weapons that would actually destroy them, there's absolutely no reason why Hux couldn't just send in waves and waves of TIE fighters, which we see can actually catch up to the Resistance ships. And given the fact that we see how much damage just a couple can do, there's absolutely no reason to believe that a few dozen of them wouldn't be able to just annihilate the Resistant fleet. So why doesn't Hux just do that? Well, there's a simple answer for that. It's because of the Resistance can still fight back. If Hux sends in waves and waves of TIE fighters to go and kill the Resistance ships, this gives the Resistance one final chance for a defiant last stand, where they just go down swinging, killing as many of the First Order bastards as they can before they die, thus sending a message out to the rest of the galaxy that the Resistance would rather die than submit to the First Order, thus possibly sparking future rebellion that the First Order would then have to deal with. Option 2, all Hux has to do is wait. Eventually, those ships will run out of fuel and therefore power, and then can be easily destroyed without any cost to Hux, thus robbing the Resistance of that defiant last stand and sending a completely new message throughout the galaxy that if you step up against the First Order, you're going to lose hard. And that is just far more diabolical and just tactically smart thinking. So the next question. Why didn't Holdo just tell Poe the original plan in the first place? And out the gate, this can seem like such a reasonable question to ask. Why would she withhold any information from Poe to begin with? Poe's a well-liked member of the Resistance, and if she told him the original plan, maybe he could even help contribute to calming the rest of the crew and letting everyone know that everything's going to be okay. And that's all from our outside perspective, but if we put ourselves in Holdo's, why would she? Poe's already shown the ability to disregard direct orders from superior officers, mind you, in favor of his own, which did lead to half the Resistance fleet getting killed. And as Holdo says in this scene here,
I've dealt with plenty of trigger-happy flyboys like you. You're impulsive, dangerous, and the last thing we need right now.
So he's lost the trust of the superior officers to do the right thing and act rationally. And she's even kind of justified when Poe pieces together part of the plan and then freaks out because he doesn't know the full story. Just put yourself in Holdo's position for a minute and ask the question, what would happen if she told Poe the whole plan in perfect detail and that still wasn't good enough? Imagine what would happen if Poe took that information and then spread it across the rest of the crew, the rest of the Resistance, that the plan wasn't going to work, it was going to fail, everyone was going to die, and that he had actually his own plan in mind that he thought it was going to work, and because everybody trusts Poe, everybody likes Poe, and because because Poe is such a charismatic guy, everyone falls in line behind Poe and they overthrow Holdo and they place Poe in charge because his plan is going to work and Holdo's isn't. So instead of evacuating to the planet that they're supposed to, they continue sailing on forward, waiting for Finn and Rose's plan to succeed so they can jump to light speed and escape. Well, Finn and Rose's plan goes about as well as it does in the movies, except this time there's no Holdo to warp speed her ship into Snoke's ship, saving them, and it leads to both Rose and Finn being horribly executed. And then because the Resistance ship didn't evacuate to the planet like they were supposed to, they continue onward and eventually run out of fuel, at which point the First Order just destroys their ship and the Resistance dies. That is everything that would happen if Poe freaks out after hearing Holdo's full plan. Of course, we discover later on that when Poe actually hears the full plan, he's completely on board with it. So that could loop us back around to, well, why wouldn't she just tell him the plan to begin with then? Well, it's easily answered with, because she's not a mind reader. Poe's place in the movie is being the guy you trust, because the movie actively tries to trick you. You're supposed to trust Poe, and you're supposed to distrust Holdo. The problem is, people seem to have missed the point where it's revealed that Holdo isn't actually incompetent. She actually had a real plan that even Poe agrees with, and she never actually hated Poe to begin with. It was just a matter of the survival of the Resistance. And these events change Poe's character when you go near the end of the movie where Luke shows up to stand up against the First Order and Finn gets ready to go outside to stand alongside him. This is what happens. Poe is the one to stop Finn. If this was the same Finn as at the start of the movie, he would have been right out there alongside Finn and Luke to stand up against the First Order. The events that transpired between Holdo and him have changed his personality. He's no longer the same Poe as before. This is solidified when he repeats Holdo's speech that she gave on board her ship.
We are the spark that will light the fire that will restore the Republic.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
This is why Leia lets Poe lead the remainders of the Resistance out of the caves, because he's no longer thinking about just winning glory. He's also thinking about the survival of the group. Poe has now become the leader of the Resistance that they always needed him to be, and that is great storytelling. And speaking of Holdo, that does lead us into the next and final question, which is, does Holdo's maneuver break Star Wars logic? So the crux of this question asks, if people could just warp bomb their ships into other ships all this time, why wouldn't the Rebels, why wouldn't the Resistance just do that? Why not just get a bunch of ships together, man them entirely with droids, and then just warp bomb them into the First Order or the Imperial fleets and destroy them that way? So doesn't the introduction of this ability that Holdo presents in the film sort of break Star Wars logic? And I would have to say no, not at all, for several factors that I think aren't being taken into account when asking this question. The first and foremost being money. The Rebels, the Resistance, they just simply don't have enough money to be wasting all their ships on that kind of a tactic to begin with. Literally, the biggest ship that the Resistance has in The Last Jedi is an old decommissioned ship from the days of the original Rebellion itself. And that was one of the biggest ships that they had. That doesn't exactly scream, we got all the money to spend on the things we want. That's why every time you meet the Resistance, that's why every time you meet the Rebellion, they're always grossly undermanned, underpowered. They're the underdog. They don't have the kind of wealth to sport a massive amount of ships to have as the First Order or the Empire does. Secondly, it's a relatively easy tactic to beat. Just spread your ships out a bit. Have them close enough where they can cover one another, but far enough apart where they won't be affected by any sort of warp bombing shrapnel effect. And thirdly, it's not really that effective of a tactic to begin with. And I know that might sound odd given the fact that it does this to the First Order fleet, and it really is to a bunch of ships clustered together like that. But I think the fact that the largest ship that the Resistance had, which was also one of the largest ships that the Rebellion had back in the day, wasn't enough to actually fully destroy Snoke's ship, given the fact that all the main characters that were on board it survived, and that there was still life support to let them survive, pretty much guarantees in my mind that in no way would this tactic have even disabled something like the Death Star, which is far, far, far bigger. Even at something like, 50% completion, it was able to start firing its planet-destroying laser. So that all but confirms in my mind that this tactic wouldn't have been any kind of effective for the Rebels to use against the Empire in any way, shape, or form, that had a much larger fleet and much more resources at its disposal. And even then, what next? After the Rebels use up all of their ships, where do they go? The entire point of the Rebels and the Resistance is they're able to run away to live to fight another day and keep fighting and dragging the fight out and chipping away say at the Empire and the First Order, if they don't have any of their ships, they're locked to whatever planet they are currently on, and then the Empire or the First Order just shows up and then just bombard them from orbit, and that's the end of the movie. The Rebels and Resistance need every single ship that they can get their hands on, and to have a ship that they can use for years and years and years fighting a rebellion will do far more long-term damage than the one-time use of a warp bomb attack, even in Haldo's case. And with that, I feel like I've successfully answered all these questions, but I leave it up to you guys to decide. Do you think these answers are acceptable for these questions? And if not, tell me why not in the comments below. And if you like this video, please give me a like, and if you want to see more, and you like hearing about all this nerdy stuff that I talk about, that's what my channel is all about. I like talking about this kind of stuff. I do all sorts of different things, from movie game reviews, cosplays, costume builds, fan films, LARPing, LARP talks, basically anything that has to do with nerdy stuff. I've either done a video on or will do a video about, so if you really like those kind of things, please subscribe to my channel. I'll do my best to keep you entertained, and as always, thank you guys very, very much for watching my videos. I really do appreciate that, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.